Hey, Hawkeye fans! Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, Kennington Smith, Des Moines Register, with you for our Tuesday YouTube podcast. You know the drill by now. We're going to do three topics in about 30 minutes. Kennington, you and I in Iowa City today with a lot on the line. I recall last week we kind of said, well, this is our 1 week to talk about Iowa being in the Big Ten West race. Potentially. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but I guess the mood today felt like, to me, pretty energetic. There were a lot of players there. It seemed like a really important week and a lot of upbeat Hawkeye players to me.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's just a completely different energy, obviously, around the team after 3 straight wins versus 3 straight losses. And I think that you start to see the confidence coming out of these players. And they've always been a confident group, even going back to the Michigan game, where it really felt like the players were confident what they put on the field, even in a losing effort. And it was kind of hard to see that from the outside because they were still losing efforts. But when you put that confidence with winning results, you really start to kind of like see it bounce off of the players. And I think that there's been a renewed sense of energy. Obviously, they weren't giving up on the season, but there is a legitimate path to winning a consecutive Big Ten West title based on what Illinois has been doing in the last couple of weeks. And they understand there's a huge challenge ahead of them in Minnesota, a team that has 7 wins. So they have more wins than Iowa, and also is in the race as well. So rivalry game, trophy game, a trophy that they've held on to for the last several years. So there's a lot of motivation from Iowa's players to go out there and put their best foot forward and win on Saturday.
So we are going to talk a little bit more about the Iowa-Minnesota matchup a little later in our show, and then we'll have actually another podcast tomorrow or Thursday previewing the game in lieu of our radio show. We do not have a radio show tomorrow night because of Cyclone women's basketball. Dang it, Bill Fennelly. No, but plenty to talk about. Plus the Hawkeyes play tomorrow night in men's basketball. So anyway, just a little heads up, no actual radio show, but you will not be shortchanged on the podcast front. In fact, we might actually have an extra podcast this week. We're still working out that. But Kennington, let's start with, I think, what it might be the most intriguing topic of the day, which is recruiting. And certainly we talked about it a little bit on our post-game podcast, the fact that Kaden Proctor took a visit to Oregon on the weekend that Iowa beat Wisconsin at home. So our first down topic today is, where do things stand with Kaden Proctor? And I guess from my understanding, he's talking with the Iowa coaches tonight. So, it's not like he's lining up to do media interviews right now. It's certainly an influx time, right? But then combined with what Kirk Ferentz said today, it seems to be a topic that people want to know a lot more about.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm scrolling right now. I'm trying to find his exact quote, but Kirk was asked about this in terms of his thoughts on recruits taking visits elsewhere. I think you said on the postgame pod last week that is something that is usually not encouraged by Iowa commits, and that is not something that is uncommon nationally. I remember, obviously, growing up in Georgia, Paul Johnson, who used to coach at Georgia Tech, also had the same rule about recruit commits not visiting. Dabo Swinney at Clemson has that same rule as well. So it happens all over the country. But this is Kirk's quote on that, where he said, the question was, how are you guys approaching recruits who are committed taking visits elsewhere? And Kirk said, they're all different cases, and we just weigh it out. Ultimately, prospects have all the rights, and we have none. That was kind of funny. It's kind of the new world. A guy could be committed to us, and we've already experienced this with one member of this class. We chose to take one player in his position. That was his preference, and he kind of pulled the plug and had a change of heart. So you move on. The bottom line is we're not, and I don't think the fate of our program is hinging on one person's decision. We'll try to recruit around whatever happens like you would with an injury and go from there.
Yeah, so the one guy that decommitted, of course, was Kendrick Raphael from Florida. And I think from my understanding what he was getting at, I think Iowa initially planned to take one running back and then eventually decided to take two. and then Raphael decommitted in part as a result. Obviously, that's when Iowa's offense was really stinking up the joint. But Iowa has since added a running back, so they're kind of back on track there. But obviously, the Kaden Proctor thing, the quote I wanted to highlight here, Kennington, was the last part of what you read, which was Kirk saying, "I don't think the fate of our program is hinging on one person's decision." And so that I feel like there, a lot of Hawkeye fans out there may beg to differ, is what I'm saying. with that, how do you feel? I mean, I kind of know, I do kind of sympathize or empathize with what he's saying, and at this, knowing that Iowa, with the way it is handling its collective, is not going out on its own to kind of, it's not the program philosophy, I should say, to go out and pay high dollars for specific positions, like we talked about with Ohio State. A left tackle running $1 million, a quarterback running $2 million. Iowa doesn't approach it like that, and I think it's possible here with Kaden visiting Oregon, well-known deep pockets out there, that sounds like that's what's kind of, at least, we're not in the business of reporting rumors, but I think it's fair to say that there was probably some offers made while he was there. Would you feel comfortable saying that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
yeah,
we can, like you said, we're not in the business of reporting rumors. We can speak a little candidly. Whenever recruits, especially of one of that magnitude, are on these type of visits, if they're not outright offers, these coaches have a way of explaining to recruits the type of packages or endorsements that they could get at the school based on what current players on the roster are already doing. I think that's the way to phrase that. In terms of what he said about one player not defining the program, I think 99% of the time that does ring true, because to say that everything hinges on one player would say a lot about your program's culture and kind of how you built it up if everything is hinging on one player, especially a recruit, somebody that's not even on campus yet. But I don't think that this is the type of decommitment that you could just brush off and easily replace. I mean, this is one of the top 10 players in America. This is the number one player at his position, and it just so happens to be the position where Iowa has taken the most lumps this year. And I'm not inside Kirk Ferentz's head or any offensive coach's mind, but to me, Kaden Proctor is a walk-in day one starter at the tackle position. You're going to lose Jack Plum to graduation. Nick DeYoung is his backup, but he has played guard all season. We don't know what's going on with David Davikoff behind them at that tackle spot. Mason Richmond seems entrenched on the left side, but his backup on the depth chart is Jack Plum. So you really don't have much depth there at tackle. So you are expecting somebody like Kaden to come in and provide instant help. And to not have him as a part of this class, especially when you think about how much conversation surrounded that in the summer about how big it was that Iowa 2 years in a row was able to fend off a blue blood for an in-state 5-star recruit. To lose him this late in the cycle is not like they could go out and late offer this number 2 tackle in the country or another 5-star, 4-star in the country and replace them. They would have to most likely go into the portal to try to get somebody on that same level. So I understand what he's trying to say, but that would be a really, really, really big loss. And it would be interesting to see kind of like how the fans would react to that. Let's say Iowa wins the Big Ten West and end up losing Kaden Proctor's commitment. Just kind of like that would, I feel like that in some ways would put a little bit of a damper on things. And like we said, we don't know what's going to happen with that situation. Obviously, recruiting is fluid. I feel like Iowa should still feel like they're in a good spot with him, all things considered. And we'll see if they can get him on campus for the Nebraska game, last one of the season. I think that will determine a lot, just my opinion. But that's kind of where I sit on these things. And I know I'm filibustering here a little bit, so I'll let you jump in.
Yeah. Well, I think it says a lot that, and it shouldn't be surprising, I guess, that Kirk.
No.
I mean, that Iowa's not pulling his scholarship offer like they have in the past. If someone takes a visit, we saw that with the 4 Texas recruits way back before your time here, Kennington, 2017, I think it was the Benjamin class. Benjamin was one of those guys that took that other visit and ended up decommitting. But times are changed, just like Kirk Ferentz said. And I think, if I do not see this as being like any kind of like culture, you're not giving up your culture because you're not going to pull this guy's scholarship offer. I mean, that would piss people off.
Yeah.
If Kirk pulled the scholarship offer. I mean, and if you're any of the 120 guys in the locker room that are going to potentially be with Kaden Proctor, this coming spring, summer, whatnot in Iowa City, I don't think there's any animosity there saying like, oh my God, you had the gall to go take a visit at Oregon. Are you not fully committed to Iowa? I mean, I think people understand the time and place and the money that are available now to prospects because times have changed. So like you've said before, Kennington, like you don't count each other's money in your pocket, each other's pockets. And to me, it's if Iowa loses him, it is a huge deal. It is a huge deal for sure, because you're right. He can't be replaced. You're not going to get another 5-star offensive tackle that's going to pick you over Alabama very often. So I guess my point being is it's a big deal, but at the same time, it might happen because your offense is not good. And I'm not saying that's why he's, at least lending an ear to Oregon. I think it's, speculation here, but I think a lot of it has to do with the opportunities that Oregon may be able to offer in terms of NIL. Don't know that 100%, but that sounds like what is going on. Again, not reporting rumor, but I think we can all connect dots here. Yeah. And so, and it could, maybe that changes the way Iowa does business in the future, just like potentially this season changes the way Iowa runs its offense and changes the way it does business in the future. So ongoing saga, we may, who knows? Kaden Proctor may have a tweet later tonight after meeting with Iowa coaches, by the time this podcast is posted, who knows? So stay tuned on that front, and we're going to keep obviously following it. And
if I could say one more thing.
Come fast. Yep.
If I could say one more thing on this. What you just said about there's a chance that he could come out tonight, tomorrow, and reaffirm his commitment to Iowa. That is something that happens regularly on the recruiting circuit at the highest level. And when you are in the business of recruiting the top players in the country, this is naturally a part of it. It may not be settling to fans, and it might be uncommon for players in Iowa's program to commit and then several months later take another visit. But when you are a player of that magnitude, coaches are relentless, and they are not going to stop recruiting you until the pen is on the paper on early signing day or late signing day. So he's a prospect that I'm sure, if not Oregon, other coaches around the country are still trying to kick the tires on him, and it's going to be a fight to the finish, much like Xavier Wampa was a fight to the finish as well. So these are elite prospects. Coaches are going to go after them relentlessly. Sometimes these things may happen. It could end up resulting in a decommitment, or nothing could happen at all. But that's just kind of the nature of it when you're recruiting at that high of level. And I don't think it should be something that you hit the panic button on yet until obviously we hear what happens one way or the other.
Yeah. And don't forget, Iowa does this to MAC schools. It does this to FCS schools. I mean, how many guys in their current class? I bet several, right? The running back was an FAU commit. The offensive lineman, wasn't he a North Dakota State guy? Just recent guys they've added. I mean,
yeah. Caleb Johnson, TJ Hall. I mean,
current Hawkeyes. We should make a list.
Flipping is a part of the game. So
yeah, Iowa does it too. So it's not unusual, and Iowa, can't play the victim here either. And also, don't forget, Kaden Proctor's preparing for a state championship this week as well. So he's got a lot going on in his life. Let's give him a little space here and let him come to his decision. All right, second down. That one went a little long, Kenny, but that's all right. It was a big topic. This week, Iowa at Minnesota, 3 p.m. Fox Sports. Yeah, the big Fox. We talked about it at the top. Essentially, the question here is this a Big Ten West title game for the Hawkeyes? Obviously, we know three things need to happen. Regurgitate that plenty of times. You just need Illinois to lose to Michigan, 18-point underdog there, and then for Iowa to win its last two games. So the first one being Minnesota, Iowa slight underdog, and then at home against Nebraska. So with that landscape, there's clearly one of those three that is the least likely outcome, and that would be Iowa, Minnesota. So is it as simple as that? I mean, are you looking at this, Kennington, as, Iowa this weekend is playing to win the Big Ten West with, I'm not going to say Nebraska is a formality because that game has not been easy, but this is the game, right?
Yeah, at least in my opinion, it is. And I think that you asked specifically about the whole scoreboard watching with Illinois and Michigan. I think that is probably the only caveat for me to not call this the outright Big Ten West championship games, because there's a chance. Illinois could go to the Big House and upset Michigan. I don't think that's going to happen because Michigan also has to stay undefeated for their own playoff hopes. So they don't have anything sewed up by any means. So I think their eyes are going to be wide open for Illinois. But for me, this is the Big Ten West clincher for Iowa. I think that, especially knowing that, what's on the horizon with the Nebraska game. And I'm speaking more so from my vantage point. I don't think that Iowa is, looking at Nebraska as some sort of layup or anything like that. But you think about the circumstances of last year's game where there was, injuries and the flu bug and all of those things that kind of contributed to it being such a wacky game. I imagine an Iowa team that is coming off of a Minnesota win. You would hope at full tilt, full health, and they're looking at Nebraska as like, okay, we need to make sure that that we lock this down and we don't leave anything to chance, and we win this game and we go back to Indy. So to me, it's the Big Ten clincher. I think even if players won't admit it, that they're maybe even looking at it in that same way. I think that, again, like I said when we started this show, I feel like there has been a renewed energy with the team that what looked like was so out of reach 3 weeks ago is very much in their grasp right now. And I feel like they're extremely motivated to finish the job and to finish it out with 5 wins and to go to Indy. So I'm looking at it in that way. I'll be interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, it's totally agree. I mean, it's just hard for me to imagine, given the character of the guys on this team, given the defense that this Iowa program has, that if Iowa beats Minnesota on Saturday, that they would not come home against a team it has owned in the last 7 years and within a home crowd against a team that, let's be honest, it has to. I mean, it may be it's Nebraska's last game of the season, but I cannot imagine a lot of those guys are looking forward to coming up here and just getting, physical to death for 60 minutes by this Iowa team, which is extremely physical. We saw that play out. We've seen that play out every single Saturday. I mean, this Iowa team absolutely pounds you on defense in particular. Offense, obviously, a different story. But Iowa's going to be physical with you. It's going to be cold. It's just hard for me to imagine Iowa losing in that situation. So in that sense, I agree that this is the game. This is the game for Iowa to do it. And then you can come home and win the Big Ten West on your field next Friday, on Black Friday. And what a swing that would be, Kennington, potentially from the downer of the first, 4 home games of this season. Quite the reversal. To reward a sellout crowd for the season, right? I mean, it's why do we buy these season tickets? Well, right. Now you've got a ticket for potentially the Big Ten West clincher if everything goes according to plan.
That could be a dual trophy game the last week of the season. So they played in Nebraska in 2021. So pandemic year, there were no fans in the stadium.
Yeah.
And
but
then
it was they played it earlier. It was on Black Friday
okay,
also that year, but it was earlier because of the calendar. It was like week
right,
6 that year.
right. So there
Instead
were
of
no
week 8.
fans. And then in 2018, what was the state of the team for that Nebraska game at home? Was
Yeah,
that
that was it was just kind of playing for a bowl game. That was Scott Frost's first year. And
okay?
so it was a great game. Iowa won 31-28 on a last second field goal. Really, like it just like brings back so many vivid memories. But Iowa made such a gutsy Newkirk call in that game. 28-28, 4th down and 8 with like a minute to go. And or maybe that was a minute. Yeah, it was like a minute to go. And he went for it. And Nate Stanley completed a pass to TJ Hawkinson for a first down. And then they got in position. They ran another play or two and then got in position to kick a winning field goal. But if they missed that 4th and 8, they could have punted easily. Old Kirk now would have punted, right? So, yeah, so that's what happened. So, yeah, they haven't really had – in 15, they clinched the West against Purdue on this field in week 11, but it wasn't the finale. So there hasn't been that type of moment, I guess, where you kind of walk off on your own field as West champs is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So
I think that's what you're saying too, right?
yeah. So that's what I'm trying to get at in that regard. That would be I think historic might be too strong of a word, but it would be like a very special type of moment for the team to play in that atmosphere. And I think the fans, they have risen to the occasion in every game. I think that would probably be one of the more juiced up atmospheres that we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah. And we will know by the time Iowa kicks off at 3:00 on Saturday because Illinois, Michigan play at 11 a.m. You can read my story at hawkcentral.com, but players are mixed, on whether they're going to watch a little bit of that game, but none of them will be like, at least according to them, checking their phones to check the score like before they go out on the field. Kirk Ferentz is right. I think you don't want to get too emotionally attached to that game. You got to focus on the task at hand. And that's Iowa's approach. It sounds like Petrus said he would watch maybe the first quarter out of interest. I think that's fine and see where things are headed or whatever. But yeah, we'll know. We'll know. So anyway, 3rd down. We are running a little bit long here, but that's all right. How much better will Iowa's offensive line be this week? Kennington Smith writing the article. I believe he filed it right before we started this podcast, so it should be up pretty soon at hawkcentral.com if it's not already. Obviously, that was the biggest headache from last week against Wisconsin was the poor play of the O-line. That was a focus of my DVR Monday. What did you ascertain from your conversation with Logan Jones, who was the only offensive lineman brought to availability today? I'm sure he had plenty to say. He's always a really good quote.
Yeah. So the story is live on hawkcentral.com, and the headline reads, "Can Iowa's offensive line bounce back versus Minnesota? Logan Jones dissects areas of improvement." So I spent a large amount of time with Logan Jones today during availability, and the takeaways that I gained from him, as well as talking to Spencer Petras and asking Kirk Ferentz questions as well, was one, Wisconsin, especially this year, was a really bad matchup for Iowa's offensive line. The odd man front, to your point that you put in the preview, usually gives Iowa's offensive line trouble. But this year, with such a young group that isn't used to seeing those odd man fronts, they were really able to confuse them, led to a lot of mental errors and communication issues that led to a lot of sacks. And Kirk Ferentz went a step further and said, even past that, there were moments where he felt like certain linemen were in good one-on-one positions and they got beat, and it was disappointing to go back and to watch that. So I think it was just a combination of bad matchup and then also poor individual play at times. How are they going to bounce back against Minnesota? Biggest takeaway in that regard is that Minnesota's defensive front is very similar to Iowa's schematically, also Northwestern as well. So there won't be many surprises in terms of eye candy and those type of things. So communication-wise, it should be a little bit easier in that regard. Game planning-wise, it should be a little simpler, but it's going to come down to the offensive line executing at a much higher level. And It may sound mundane, but a lot of that is just going to come down to them communicating better and doing better at the fundamental things that they were able to do against Northwestern and Purdue. So you could read a lot more about that on Hawkeye Central. I went into a lot more of like the intricacies and the nuances in the piece. So you can go check that out. But those are just kind of like a few takeaways that I have, just off the top.
Yeah, kind of going along with the offensive theme, I found it encouraging, I feel like, from the Iowa perspective, that Minnesota plays a defense that's similar to what Iowa sees in practice every day. Now, obviously, the same could be said for Minnesota against Iowa, but I just happen to think Iowa's defense is so much better than – maybe not so much better than Minnesota, but is going to be the superior defense on the field in any game it plays all year long. But that said, here's what Spencer Petras had to say about the Minnesota defense. He said, schematically, it's very similar to Northwestern. A lot of cover 4, a lot of really low safeties trying to take the run away. Pretty different from Wisconsin, but attitude-wise, it feels pretty similar of just, we're going to take the run away. So, in other words, it plays a lot like Northwestern. And that was a good offensive day for the Hawkeyes. And I know Minnesota's, secondary is pretty good. But I think their linebackers are where they are most suspect, and we will get into that a little bit in our preview podcast. But I just feel like there's an opportunity there for this offensive line to excel, because Iowa had a good offensive day against Northwestern. And obviously Minnesota's defense is much better than Northwestern's. But that said, it doesn't have that game wrecker like Nick Herbig that Wisconsin had, like Ohio State had. I feel like it's just more of a mentally manageable position for the Hawkeyes. Now Kennington, with the snap count issues, did Logan Jones talk about that today? Because snap timing issues, I should say, because that is something in my text group that has been a major source of frustration, watching snaps kind of either be delayed or offensive linemen's retreats being delayed. And it does seem like an ongoing issue, and I know Kirk was asked about it today as well. What did Logan say about that?
Yeah, I mean, he took all the responsibility. He said that it is a him thing, and he says that sometimes he's late, sometimes guys are jumping early. A lot of it just depends on him getting the feel and anticipating it. So he put it all on him. He pretty much just kind of chalked it up to he is just not being consistent enough. There's not anything schematically or coaching wise or anything like that. That's the big adjustment. It is pretty much a confidence thing for him to anticipate the snap and to get it off correctly. And Spencer Petras spoke to that as well. He said that Iowa's offense is not one where it's like a clap cadence type of offense where you see this in football, quarterback claps once, the ball is coming. It's a lot more rhythm and feel than that. So in that regard, Logan has to continue to work on anticipating when the snap needs to come. And Spencer said he usually likes it pretty early, and Logan is still trying to adjust to that. And he's trying to, Barnett, Ferentz, everybody who's working with him is trying to communicate with him about how much of an advantage that is for the offensive line to kind of get that good get off with a little bit of anticipated snap when everybody's moving on one accord. They said that Logan understands that. He feels like he's doing a good job in improving at it, but it's just going to take some time. Obviously, there is such a huge drop-off from Tyler Linderbaum to anybody, much less Tyler Linderbaum to somebody who just started snapping 8 months ago or however long it's been. So it's going to take a little bit of time. It seems like Petras has a lot of confidence in him. Kirk said something to the effect of, you would hope that those issues wouldn't be present in November, but they still are. And it just kind of an is what it is type of thing. And he's going to have to continue to work with it. But that's kind of the best answer that I can give is just Logan has to continue to work at it. He has to continue to build confidence. And as he does that, it should be less of an issue as time goes on.
Well, time's running out, but okay.
Right, exactly.
Thank you for asking. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I tried.
Not a satisfactory answer, but I guess I understand it. And then injury front-wise, Kennington, right guard Bo Stevens probably out. That's what it sounded like based on what Kirk said, not practicing. Maybe has a chance to get back, but When I pressed him a little bit, sounds like Nick DeYoung will start at right guard. So you're going to see. And then I asked about, Jack Plum at tackle. He gave up 3 of the 6 sacks in that game. And then he also allowed another pressure on a +0 scramble for Petrus. So really 4. But Kirk gave him a vote of confidence. I mean, I don't know what else you can do, but he's going to be the right tackle on Saturday. I thought maybe they might think about tinkering, but what do you think? I know we got to get going here, but of a DeYoung Plum pairing, I mean, these were maligned right tackles a year ago, and now you're counting on them to lock down the right side of the line. Do you just run left, or do you think they'll be okay?
Yeah, I think I would say majority run left. I think that the fact that there's not, I can't even say that there's not a consideration, because they are so down to the studs at tackle that it feels like Plum has to continue to play at right. I mean, Plum, who are the tackles listed on the 2D? Plum, Richmond, who are the starters, and then Plum is Richmond's backup on the depth chart, and then DeYoung is Plum's backup, and DeYoung hasn't played tackle all year. Connor Colby, the experiment didn't work. Now he's at guard. I mean, they really don't have many options that they could go to at that spot. So I feel like they could do a lot of what happened. I think it was the Northwestern game, running a lot to the left with Colby and Richmond, masking a lot of what was happening on the right side, and just hope that works again against Minnesota. Maybe if it gets to be that bad, you might slide DeYoung out and you put a lot of faith in Jennings Dunker, and maybe Tyler Ellsbury can get some snaps as well on the inside. But me personally, I would put a lot of faith on that left side of the line, and it worked well. I mean, against Northwestern and Purdue, Caleb Johnson running to that side behind the 2 best linemen right now, which is Richmond and Colby at guard. So that'll probably be my antidote for how they can fix that.
Yeah. All right, good show, man. We will also, Arlen Bruce IV is back, so he will help the run game as well, just being a distraction in the jet sweep game and potentially running it himself here and there. So that's a positive. So thanks, Kennington Smith. For Kennington, this is Chad Leistikow of the Register. We will be back with you very, very soon with more podcasts. And don't forget, Iowa Seton Hall basketball, Wednesday night, 6:30 p.m. FS1. We'll be back with you soon. I think we're planning on a post-game podcast from that. That is kind of the tentative plan. Don't crush us if we don't do it, but I think that's what we're going to try to do. So we will probably talk to you then, if not sooner. Thanks for tuning in.